Donald Trump there walking out of the courtroom after being convicted of 34 felony charges. But will any of this affect his bid for the presidency? We need some help here. Let's bring in Kelly-Jane Torrance, who's with the New York Post, Philip Bump with the Washington Post. They've both been covering this extensively. We've talked a lot over the years. And Kelly, I know you're covering the campaign. We were all watching intently as news of the verdicts came out. Where were you for this moment? What ran through you?
Yeah, I was in the New York Post newsroom right here in Manhattan. And, we were all a little surprised because the judge had said that, he was going to dismiss the jurors at 4:30 p.m. for the day. And it was just very shortly before that they had reached a verdict. So people had already, said, OK, we're done for the day, moving on. What stories are we going to put at the front of the paper, et cetera, et cetera. So when it happened, we were all on alert. And of course, counting down along with all these other reporters, we have a panel of televisions on the side of the room counting down. I will say CNN was really late. They were about 20 counts off what seemed to be every other television station, and waiting. Was there going to be a single not guilty verdict? And of course, as you and your viewers know, Adrienne, he was found guilty on all counts.
And Philip, your reaction, I'm not sure, were you also in the newsroom?
I wasn't. I'm in New York, and the Post obviously is down in Washington. I was at home and watching on Twitter, and my reaction was similar, just sort of amazement that it had come in, and then was obviously struck by the the unanimity of it, I guess to say.
So we've been talking for a bit now about how voters might respond. I wouldn't mind pulling up a graphic that we made. This is a poll from about a month ago. Americans were asked, would you vote for Republican candidate Donald Trump or Democratic candidate Joe Biden under the following circumstances? If Trump had been found innocent, we see around 46% there. Trump guilty without imprisonment, 39%. Guilty with, 37%. Interestingly, in all these scenarios, you see a drop for Trump if he's found guilty. But Biden's numbers don't seem to budge. And sure, this was a poll done in April, but it's still slightly telling. Kelly, I'm wondering what you think we can make of that.
Really, Biden is the one who's really got to try to win some voters back, especially getting ones who voted for him in 2020 to show up again. And, whether Donald Trump is convicted or not doesn't really change people's perceptions of President Biden. Now, I've seen, more recent polls, some other polls showing that there isn't a huge difference in whether people take away their support for Trump if he is convicted. So obviously, the pollsters will be getting to work first thing this morning if they haven't already started. And in a week or two, we'll see some new polling. But I do think that it's not necessarily going to provide that big drop for Trump that we saw in some earlier polls. As it's gone on, of course, so much has come out in the trial and not come out in the trial since that April poll, Adrienne. So it will be very interesting to see what effect this has. And of course, it's the swing states that where these votes really matter.
And I know you're the one to watch in the swing states because I know that is particularly your area of expertise here. Philip, what's your thought? Again, as Kelly points out, that poll was it's from April 29th, roughly. But I find it interesting that there isn't any movement at all for Biden and just a slight dip for Trump.
Yeah, I mean, the different polls say different things in terms of what that looks like. One of the things that we've seen is an interesting dynamic this year is that when you poll people who are more likely to actually vote, you see more support for Biden than you might otherwise. So, there are a lot of conditions that affect those things. I think it is the case that a lot of this is baked in. A lot of the perceptions about what Donald Trump has done and the importance of it are already factored into polling. I don't hold a lot of stock in polls which assess how people are likely to act once this occurs. I actually just this evening went back and looked at polling in the aftermath of the Access Hollywood tape in October of 2016. At that point, mid-October 2016, only 3 weeks before the election, and with this tape coming out of the blue, the 15% of Republicans said that was a deal breaker. They weren't going to vote for Donald Trump. Well, sure enough, 2 weeks later, Donald Trump was elected president of the United States. So I think that the trying to impute what is going to happen based on asking people now what they plan to do in November, lots of things can happen between now and November, and a lot of the people who are saying, this makes me a little squishy on Donald Trump are probably going to end up voting for Donald Trump anyway. So I think the short answer is not, oh, this doesn't change things. I think the short answer is we have no idea. This is so unprecedented. This is so unusual. And it is so outside of the norms of what we usually think of as being things that can shake up a political race. It's extremely hard to say with certainty what might happen.
I think we always talk about what affects an American race is the October surprise. We're not even in June yet. So, Kelly, one of the things I appreciate about you is that you stay in pretty close contact with voters. You talk to Republicans all the time. And I'm curious what the interesting emails have been or text messages to you today.
Well, Adrienne, I have to say first, I follow a lot of different people from all over the political spectrum on Twitter. And it was very striking to me. You had people seem to either very angry and outraged or very happy and exultant. And I did get some text messages from some of my Republican friends, and some of them made some very good points. One, Dan McCarthy, who's a great writer down here in the U.S., he thinks that, this could be very bad for the country. You had what he considers a bad conviction from a judge who was not, seemed pretty biased. But then you had a bad reaction from Trump himself. The judge is going to be the one sentencing him. And one of the first words out of Donald Trump's mouth after the conviction was calling the judge corrupt. So this is not going to make the judge even more happy with Trump, that's for sure. And if we do see some kind of jail time, it really could tear the country apart in some ways. So, the United States, I think people have thought of it as more polarized than ever since 2016. It could be about to get worse.
So, Philip, when you're considering sort of the temperature of the United States, what are you looking towards in the next few weeks or months? What will be the moments that you're going to try to gauge here? Well,
when we're talking about any sort of tipping point for the United States, obviously Election Day is the main one. I think we're a few hours past the verdict. I think it's very easy in this moment to assume that this is going to have some massive effect, on people's perceptions. I will point out that what we just heard was very much the case that Donald Trump has been making. I don't think it's a particularly valid case, but it is, when we compare this to past moments, we've never had not only a former president who's been convicted of a crime before, we've never had one who has done so much groundwork to establish this as some sort of illegitimate trial and illegitimate finding in the way that Donald Trump has. And so, is there going to be are people over time going to understand that was Trump's rhetoric, that it doesn't necessarily capture the truth? Are people, are the jurors going to come out and are they going to speak to the press and say, actually, this is how we made this decision? And, we are just normal people. And, when you were making these critiques, the people you're criticizing, there are lots of ways in which this can both be reframed. And I think the temperature can settle down. I think it necessarily will settle down. But I think every American is looking warily toward November 5th.
All right, Philip, Kelly Jane, thank you very much. I was going to ask you, Kelly Jane, what's on the front page. I know you're not going to tell me, so we'll talk to you at some point.
Ours is on Twitter, by the way, so feel free to check out the post.
Take care.